What's up? To introduce everybody, SAF Mo,
Right.
Dr. Raj, Jonathan's back with us, McCullen, Minnesota,
Y'all give it up for Jonathan.
Minnesota Justice Coalition. Raj gonna do some grounding. Everywhere I go, he grounding us. Grounding, like I don't.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
He's grounding us. So we were just talking a little bit off camera about just you in general, John. You know who you are as an individual. You know what makes you who you are. Because like I said, I didn't know who you were when I met you. I know Raj from the joint, so I know his credentials. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and who you are,
Yep.
and what you've been doing in our community.
Right. Well, my name is Jonathan McClellan. I am president of the Minnesota Justice Coalition, and we work with families and community to draft and advance legislation and other policy initiatives at the Capitol here in St. Paul, Washington, D.C. For 20 years, we've been in the field of policy and building relationships and trying to bring the issues from the community that typically don't have a voice into the halls of power. We've worked with other organizations and helped some organizations start their organizations and teach people how to get the work done. Our bread and butter is working with community and families, and some families who lost loved ones to police violence, and bringing those stories and weaving that fine needle through the stories and pulling out meaningful policy that can help change lives and ensure that we don't end in some of the places that some of these cases have been. We also support direct action initiatives and different things like that around the community to get the information out into the public's sphere. And we work with a lot of different organizations and people within the community and legislators, both congressionally and in statewide here and in other states, on drafting and pushing policy out there and building relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's 2023's motto is relationship building. Is what I think that's very important, to be able to build a relationship, because through a relationship, I think all the needs are met. Now, Dr. Raj, I come to you in a different, I've known you for quite a long time, because you've been coming to the prisons for a while. I've been told that you're doing stuff with restorative justice in the prisons.
Yeah.
How's that look for you?
So it's a class right now, but the concept of restorative justice has been with the DOC, the Department of Correction, for a minute, right? They've been funded to have a separate office of 2 or 3 people who will work on responses like letters of apology, right, from folks who have committed the harm, who are inside, and if the family that have been affected by the violence ask for an apology and they want to have a discussion, they start with an apology note. So these 3 folks will arrange all of that for the community to be able to talk to them, and then them who caused the harm to write a letter of apology. So that started off as the restorative process within the Department of Corrections, right? And then there's also people who have committed sexual violence also have a chance to meet with folks from the outside. Say 3 or 4 of us will go in and work with 1 or 2 of those brothers who have committed sexual violence. And instead of having the direct victim in a place, we have a surrogate victim.
Okay.
So if I was sexually molested or affected by someone else, but not this person whom I was going to go meet, I become the surrogate person who was harmed.
Right.
So I go in, I tell them how I felt when that was done to me, and they get to understand, right, the so-called victim's perspective,
Okay.
right? And that's a form of restorative practices that we've been doing with Department of Corrections for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that restorative process, unbeknownst to a lot of individuals,
Yeah.
is it actually can occur in the actual charging part, not just we see it in prisons,
Oh, yeah.
or
Yeah.
that as a device, but we can also use restorative justice before the person
Correct.
even enters
Correct.
county jail
Correct.
as a form of repairing the community. Are you part of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So there's one other aspect, right? So we do this type of like victim offender dialogue, and then the letter writing, and then there's also a RJ 101 classes in Faribault, right? In every prison there's supposed to be a RJ 101. So people are taught like what is restorative justice. So they sit in a circle. It's just more of a here's theoretically what restorative justice is. So that's done within the walls of the prison. Outside, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing,
Okay.
right? So one is there's a beautiful a case scenario, right? A young man and his friends were running around Jimmy Lee Center, right? Community center, and they got picked up by their friend. They went on a ride, and then they decided that too many people are crowded in one car.
Yeah.
So they're gonna pick up another car.
Mm-hmm.
So they went and found another car, and they drove, and they got tired. The friends left this guy and this other dude who were in this car, went on about towards their house, and they parked, about a couple of blocks from their house, and then proceeded to trash the car. And cops were called because the neighbors were watching, like, what are they doing to this car? Cops came in, arrested this young man, found out that he stole the car, right? And so we got the case from Ramsey County, and so myself and Dr. Manson were there, the mother and the young man who committed the crime, right? And the woman whose car was stolen was sitting there. Also, her social worker was sitting there. So this was a beautiful case about like, so we asked the question of like, what happened on that day when you stole the car? They said, well, I was in school, got out of school early, my friends came, picked me up, my mom didn't know what I was doing, we went on a joyride and this is what we did, and we picked up this car. And peace went all the way through, went to the young woman whose car was stolen. She took the talking piece, she looked at the young man, he said, I want you to look at me, I want you to see me. And he's like draped, his hoodie was on, and she said, young man, I want you to look at me. And he's like, pulled himself up, pulled up his hoodie and looked at him. She said, I came to see you as a person, not the person who stole my car. I don't want to see you as the person who stole my car, who damaged, who cost me $8,000 worth of damage.
Mm.
That's a felony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? She said, but I didn't come here to scream at you. I find it hard to forgive you. But I'm going to give you a gift. And she brought a gift, bro. She made 2 bottles, small bottles, right, with a cork at the top, so you can poke a hole and hang it on your necklace. She said, I want you to have this, and I want you to look at this bottle. At the bottom of the bottle, right, there were broken piece glasses. She said, those glasses were glasses that y'all broke from the car.
Mm.
And we were like, all like, oh my God, what? Then she said, I have rocks on top, and then I have crystals at the top. I want you to become that crystal,
Mm-hmm.
right? you are not going to be defined by these broken glasses. These rocks are the pathways that you have to maneuver. And once you get through, I know you have the potential of being a crystal. Bro, that was
touching.
just like
Yeah, that was very touching. And that's sort of how it should look.
how it should look.
That's how it should look.
Yeah.
I was just talking to an individual who was talking about Europeans and how they deal with the criminal justice system, way different from how we deal with it, because ours has a slavery base device that they can't maneuver past, right? Gives ability to treat another human being as an animal, which is so what? But in the European, they don't look as much to the individual as they look to the community as being responsible for a bad act, right? So they could easily point a finger, point that finger back at yourself, and all their institutions are set up to blame you, right? At the end of the day, it's your fault for what you've done, and you need to figure out what you did and correct yourself, because when we give you another opportunity, we got space for you if you want to come back. So restorative justice is not a new thing. It's not something that it's being created or it's innovation.
I actually believe that it came from Native Americans.
I thought it came from Africa.
So every indigenous communities around the world,
that's what we're talking
had
about. First
practice.
Nations.
Had a practice.
First
so
Nation.
whether it's the continent of Africa had a bunch of these things.
Yeah.
And then here in the Turtle Island, as we call the U.S., had its own indigenous communities practices.
For version of
versions
restorative
of,
justice.
and then the subcontinent like India had its own.
Right.
So you have every indigenous communities, even in Europe, the indigenous communities in Europe, the Sami people, they all had their own practice.
They were utilizing it in America. In fact, lawyers were common individuals. People didn't know the law. So you mostly defended yourself. It was the community that came in, not the state. You were able to question individuals, and I mean, it was a community orientated legal system until right now. We have career lawyers, career attorneys, career judges, who salaries are based on how many people they put in prison, how much time they can give an individual. How do you give a person 6 life sentences? You know what I'm saying? It's just crazy. So restorative justice, all I was getting at, it's not a new concept. It's something they moved away from because it doesn't do their bidding for them, right? You can't in turn take this individual and punish them for life if that process does work, right? So that's where I was with that, the whole process.
So it's easy to say, right? It's not a new concept, but it has deep roots, right? That goes, when you think about the Eurocentric white models of justice system, it's about 500 years old. Right? The restorative practices is thousands of years old. Right?
It's in the Bible.
There's a whole wisdom that has been sort of deposed and removed, dethroned, because we have a rational system now. So rationality versus the wisdom has been so we've always relied on rationality, and rationality invites us to also divide our own body, right? Restorative practices engages your entire body. But rational systems only engages up here.
Well.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you engage just your head, and you can say there's right and there's wrong, but in your body, right, you understand there is no such thing as just right and wrong. Right? Everything is a massive confluence of ideas and thoughts and perspectives, and it's messy.
Well, the great thing about it is this binary understanding of logic that they have, right? It makes things simple for them.
That's right.
Although it's not everything's dynamic, right? We're all at one time good and bad at the same time. And and like me and Jonathan and myself was just talking about how does a felony one mistake define the rest of your life. But it's been convenient for that to occur because it only disproportionately affected certain individuals. I've always told anyone that was willing to listen to me, if this same thing was happening in suburban America, they would call out a national emergency, and everybody would have full hands on deck if it had the same detriment effect that was going on. Because you could see when they just had affirmative action. When that was going in, because it was beneficial for us, you had them up in arms about that. So could you imagine something that actually went into their community that did what it did to our community, what the response would be from that community? Be totally different than what we're experiencing now in our community. What are you thinking, John?
I'm thinking that the system was designed and set up in a certain way to benefit those people who are in power, and that's white supremacy. So, and what you see now is happening now is you see a conscious kind of wakening up, and I refer to that after, when George Floyd died, how a conscious was awakened in people about the reality of what Black and brown people face day in and day out, because George Floyd could have been any one of us.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people who have lost their life, that was their story as well.
Just keep your thought. But I just got into it. I was talking to Ron B. sitting in the middle out there about the whole Charleston White conversation about George Floyd should have did more to protect his life. He shouldn't have sat down there and had them allowed this police officer to kill him. That conversation happened. That conversation is being pushed along social media lines, and I'm so disgusted with the conversation and people entertaining like this man because he did not fight for his life, whatever reasons. And I'm not here to judge, but that's a reason to say that fuck him. He doesn't deserve. And that's what they're saying about George Floyd. Charleston White was brought up here by Mickey Frost. He entertained this conversation. I had Mickey Frost over here a few weeks ago. And I'm getting, the more I hear the conversation, the more I get disgusted, because I was in a situation in prison where they tried to take my life. I fought for my life, but that was me. For me to say that what you decide to do in that situation is wrong or right, I can't tell you what you're thinking at that particular time and what's right or what's wrong at that particular juncture. So that's what I'm dealing with right now, and I'm trying to come to the conversation with some rationale, but there seems to be no rationale for this conversation at all.
I think that when you're faced with that type of situation with law enforcement, a lot of the people running their mouth, they would have did the exact same thing.
That's what I'm saying.
And so for them to come forward and say, to try to quarterback it from the stands,
right? I
think it's
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's
exactly.
Disgusting. Because like I said in that I had like maybe 15 COs on me all at one time. Mm-hmm. They used the whole case of can of mace on me, and they kept barking out orders as if I had some control. But like I said, the whole time I fought for my life. But again, I knew what the repercussions was. The repercussions was you're going to have 15 police officers trying to, because they have the right. They have the right to use deadly force on you, mm-hmm. and there no explanations needed. And forget the video cameras.
And like I said about after a police shooting earlier, it's the same thing, that law enforcement are taught to say specific things in different situations. So when they sit over here and say stop resisting, what they ain't telling you is that my partner is pulling you this way while I'm trying to pull you this way.
Whoa.
And you might feel like you're resisting or you're doing something, but it ain't me. I'm just sitting down here, and you're pulling me this direction and away from them. But then even in cases where that ain't happening, those are trigger words that are used to justify your actions. You know that if you say these things,
thought he had a gun.
I thought
he had a gun.
Right. That's a get out of jail free
Yeah.
card. You have to say it, and they go to school to learn these different trigger words. Where the rest of the public, if they say it, it has a more it's more genuine.
Of course.
Than when you have a cop that's taught this is the law, this is what you need to prove, this is what you need to say, and if you don't say it, this is your reality.
Or the first person they call is their union boss when it's a shooting.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, in a situation, this is what I had a problem with the Kim Carter situation. It's like, I was with a gentleman who part of he committed a homicide, but part of his homicide was his failure to render aid. That's a Minnesota statute. They can charge you with that, right? If you kill someone and you don't call the police, call 911, they can charge you with additional charge. Well, when she shot Dante Wright, she never rendered aid. At no particular point, all she said is that she was just crying and yelling and screaming, but she's taught as a police officer to render aid. Render aid. You just shot a kid.
Yeah, she cared more about her paycheck.
Exactly.
Than she cared about
life.
Dante.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'll never buy the argument that I thought that I had my taser. You know what I'm saying? Because if you've ever felt a gun and a taser, they feel totally different. And so I can't buy that. I can't buy that argument. And for that, but what the police took away from the family and stuff like that, and having stood in Dante Wright's room, it's eerie, and you have to think about what about all the other families that have gone through this experience
Historically.
and it's just like the system is set up to support, and you got to ask yourself, what happens if it didn't get caught on camera?
Exactly. Like,
how many of these cases weren't filmed?
Right.
For the public. When George Floyd was murdered, they tried to sweep it under the rug and say it was a medical issue.
Right. And they're still saying the same thing. They're putting that mythology out. But yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an issue, and it's definitely something that needs to be looked at as part of the process in moving forward on any type of on a policy piece, on a policy perspective. Because even the rendering aid, she had a duty to render aid, and she only cared about her paycheck, that's why we have a bill that is targeting the tax-funded portion of the pensions of law enforcement officers who commit a felony. And the sad thing about that is that a lot of people out there, including police officers, already believe that that's the case. But what they don't know is that Kim Potter's collecting a check while she's sitting in prison.
Yeah, definitely.
What they don't know is that Derek Chauvin will be collecting a check when he hits 55, and while he's on the taxpayer dime. And while she's currently on the taxpayer time, she's going to have more money when she comes out than when she went in. She's going to take a vacation. Promise you. It's going to happen. And she's going to have money in the bank to do that. Yeah. Why should the taxpayer be on the hook when they break the law and they commit felonies? No.
Yeah, definitely. She's got a full ride. She's good. Health insurance, a paycheck, write a book.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's all good. All right. We'll be right back. Come back with Dr. Raj and his narrative, and I appreciate the conversation, guys.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask y'all though, what about Tyreek Nichols being asked to put his hands behind his back and then being sprayed with mace at the same time? How do you put your hands behind your back when you're being sprayed with mace?
I don't know what the question is, but the tactics is always the same.
I feel like, are we gonna come from the outside?
You understand what I'm saying?
The conversation.
I think in those moments, just because you're a black officer, and I always have to highlight this because there's a lot of people that think that just because you put black people in those positions, that it's going to solve this race and equality thing, and somehow give us a better police. And that's and the police ain't black or white; they're blue, right? And in those moments,
like you talk about.
Yeah, well, the police are black and white. Let's not. Are we joking?
No. We're not talking about that.
They're all blue.
what we're talking about is that the tactics that they
Black
use,
and they're white.
yeah, the tactics that they use to kill us
Yeah.
is blue.
It's a blue flu.
It's blue,
I mean, you
and
can call
and
it
that's what a lot of
Okay.
families say.
Right.
The tactics, it's their training, it's the history, it's all of that. That's blue. So it doesn't matter what color of the person you put up in there. If this is what you're teaching them, if you're telling them it's okay to kill black people, it's not a black or white thing. It's a blue thing when it comes to law enforcement sitting over here hitting us with that hammer of oppression. That's what it is. And until we address that structure and tear that down,
That blue flu.
that until we tear that down, it doesn't matter what you do. We have to tear that system down because it's the system that's running that killed Tyree Nichols.
Right.
It was the system that killed him.
Right.
These
Right,
officers are part of that system.
Right.
Right. That's why I always get into my argument that when it comes to police officers and are police officers good or bad or everything like that, I always say that the police aren't good at all. There's no possible way they could ever be. Then a conversation comes off being ignorant. But in order for you to understand my positioning, you have to understand their history, their historical that you can't sit at the Capitol Hill and look down at where they have that pond down there and don't understand that they're next to that pond was where they kept the slaves. And that's the history of this country. The same way with their police department, it was initially established as a slave patrol. That's what it was established for. The same way the Texas Rangers was established to get rid of the Mexicans out of Texas. That was their whole reasoning. They killed them, they annihilated them, they got rid of them. That's the history of the Texas Rangers. The reason that Dallas has the 1 star, the Dallas Cowboys, they call themselves the Lone Star State. They were the last persons to come in the Union after slavery, and they're proud of it. So when you start talking about police departments and whether or not they should exist, you got to understand, first of all, like a dog is a dog is a dog, and you can't make a dog a cat. So you can't make this thing, all the reforming that you're doing, you can put as much fix a flat you want on that tire. It's not going to get fixed. You need to get a new tire.
That's what I'm. Oh.
You need to get a new tire. That's what needs to happen. And that's what they're not willing to talk about, and that's not the conversation they want to have. So that's when you brought up restorative justice and talking about it, we know that we know it works. We know it works. We know that it's taken individuals who would fall into the crevice of recidivism and made these people outstanding because you attached them back to their community. You made them understand, like you were just saying, Jonathan was just saying that you need that person that you don't want to mess up that cosign that they just gave you, right? You want to prove them wrong. You know what I'm saying? And that's what restorative justice does. So, do you have any more questions, audience?
Oh gosh. No, I didn't even think that we were recording.
No, I was just saying that. I was just saying that.
I have a lot of questions. Talking to Rod, I think honestly, what we've talked about tonight or whatever today, as a human group, is that humanity wins. I mean, there's no Band-Aid for anything. We have to treat each other. If we all were, I mean, I know it sounds, whatever, hippie, whatever, like
We have to strive for something, but that's the goal. That's the goal.
Thank you. Like, we have to try for something. We have to recognize each other as human beings. We're all on this earth as weird, like, we're on a planet. That's weird, anyway. And we're just trying to function, and life is scary. And, one neighborhood over is, like, something, families are going through, there's just so much hardship. And anyway, just on the planet. So that's the audience. I'm just saying, like what Raj does, kind of embracing in that vulnerable state and really like in prison. I don't think anybody should be in prison. I don't think people should have to look at their victim. Like, I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm saying the fact that like the people come together and then they make peace and then you can move on. That's what we're talking about with imprisonment. Like, let's move it forward. We know people shouldn't be in cages.
Right. It's common
You
sense.
know, what is the ladder? And that's what everybody asks, and that's what I think like everybody, as in Paul Schnell, as in everybody, you know, they're like, what are we gonna do besides, if you wanna abolish prisons, what are you gonna do? And so we need to put real concrete ideas forward of what not prison looks like. Raj is doing one aspect, I feel like, of it,
Well,
bringing families together.
Well,
It's
Paul,
a system.
I'm aware of Paul Schnell taking a trip out of the country to go look at some of those alternatives and things like that. What are
Amazing
other
stuff.
countries doing? One of the things
Yeah.
that I've seen is countries that are taking inmates and they're integrating them into a section where it's like housing. So they cook for themselves, they clean for themselves. The guards are just there to keep them company. They might kick and play some checkers or some games and stuff like that. You go to work in the morning or in the afternoon. You come back in, you sit over here and clean up your space. You cook for yourself. You got your food. You go to the store and you shop. But this is all inside of prison.
Right.
But instead of seeing instead of constantly looking at bars and steel and concrete, you're looking at what you're going to be getting into once you're released. If you need medical services, if you need to make calls, they have access to that in these other countries, but that's not how it's looked at here in the United States. And there was something that they found with that is that individuals who went through those programs, that the recidivism rate is a lot lower in those countries than what they are here in the United States. But we have a system that is steeped in oppression, racism, and this feeling to try to class somebody up, right?
Exactly.
And that's what we're dealing
That's
with.
what makes it work. I was just saying too, like I was listening to you guys talk, and as when I was in prison, I hated the word offender, because years after your sentence, they're still calling you offender. What did I do? I was offender when you hit me with the charge, got convicted, but you still want to call me offender. They utilize that as
I paid for that.
as the N word in prison, right? The guards use it. They want to always call you an offender. They want to call you an inmate. What I did see was, shout out to Easy and them. What's up to Kevin Reese and them? They start using the word justice impacted. I like that term.
Say it again.
Justice impacted
Okay.
individuals, because that's what we are. You know, I actually was using a word when I was in prison because they want to utilize the word offender and continue to demoralize you and make you feel like shit. You know what I'm saying? And they use it as like it's just run off the tongue. You know, like. And so that's what I said. I'm trying to move myself into utilizing that term, and owning that term. You know what I'm saying? Because it makes sense at the end of the day. We'll be right back.
Chad, you're Ron. What do you got to say about SAF Mo saying white MFers?
I don't give a fuck what anybody says, because it's America and you should be able to do and say what the fuck you want. God bless America.